This is Nathan Stuke, the CEO of Wisper. Thank you so much for joining us for another broadcast. Today, we're going to be talking about crucial conversations, mostly based on the book Crucial Conversations. It's a book I read a long, long time ago and just absolutely love it. Have been back to it multiple times. So I'm going to share with you some of my takeaways, and I'm also going to add a little bit to it with some of the things that we've been able to do here at Wisper, and have a little bit of fun with that. So. A little bit more about me. These are some of the movies that I like, or I should say love. I don't have a favorite one movie, but these are definitely the movies that I like to watch. Funny story about Goonies. I had only ever watched Goonies on TV. So when I went down to my brother-in-law's house with the cousins and everything, my nephews, and I'm like, "Oh, you guys have Goonies? Let's watch it." It was on DVD. So we pop in DVD and we sit there, and they're anywhere from 3 to 5 to 7 years old. We pop it in, and like in the first couple of minutes, there's cussing and there's all kinds of other stuff. I'm like, whoa, 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 wait a minute, where did this come from? I'm like, what kind of uncle am I that I sit down and have my kids watch this, and my nephews watch this? But it was really, really good movie, and I highly recommend that you watch Princess Bride. My kids, they're like, "Oh, Dad, this movie's so old," and now that they've seen it, they ask to watch it all every time it's on TV. So, as always, you define success. If you define your success, you'll always be successful. Don't settle, but you define your success. There'll always be somebody out there with a bigger car or more cars, bigger house, or something. So I want you to definitely think about what is success for you, and you don't have to get caught up in that rat race. So now let's look at crucial conversations. The definition from the book, Crucial Conversations, is a crucial conversation is a discussion between two or more people where stakes are high, opinions vary, and emotions run strong. And depending on who you are, and depending on the people you have around you, this could be a daily occurrence. This could be something that you only run into every once in a while, but I guarantee everybody has a crucial conversation that they've been a part of. Some have performed well in it, some haven't. And we're going to talk a little bit about what this is and the tools to help you with this. But spoiler alert, I'm not going to give you everything in the book. I think it's an amazing book, and I would highly recommend you read it. They have a lot of really, really good steps for helping yourself get through the crucial conversations. So what is a crucial conversation, right? So this is the definition. They kind of break it down into a couple different things. So differing opinions. Is it a political conversation? Is it how something should be done? All right. Maybe there's not a right or wrong way. It's not a hard or fast rule that something is one way, or is it physics or something like that? So think of it as my 2 cents, right? What am I putting in? What is my opinion on how something should be done? And a lot of times you have different opinions. So different people come from different past experiences, and they're bringing different backstories to the problem at hand, or the discussion at hand. When the stakes are high, asking for a raise, that's a pretty high stakes. A lot of people feel really uncomfortable asking for raises. They don't want to talk about it, but they know they need it and everything. But that's a pretty high stakes. Talking about a budget. Right? So, I need this much budget, or I don't need, or what do I have to do? How do we spend this? Having a conversation with your kids, or having a conversation with your spouse. Those can be pretty high stakes as well. And those kind of run into the emotional side, right? When emotions run strong, corrective criticism, or when, you have different opinions, but both people are very passionate about their opinion or what they're fighting for. That's where you get the strong emotions and can run into issues there. So this is kind of how they frame up what a critical conversation is. I really like this. Crucial conversations are about tough issues that are challenging, frustrating, frightening, or annoying. And the results of the conversation have a huge impact on your life. And I think an example that everybody can relate to is a bad neighbor, right? You either have had a bad neighbor, or somebody who, or you have a bad neighbor, right? Somebody who's had one. And that bad neighbor, your simple conversation about where the fence goes, or your simple conversation about having them not park in front of your house when they have their house they could park in front of. Those are very, very small conversations. And a lot of people would be like, oh, that's not a big deal. That's not a crucial conversation until you get down to the bottom. Huge impact on life. And if you have a bad neighbor, one of our friends has a bad neighbor right now, and they got drug into court because they were the witness between two other neighbors that were fighting and they didn't want to do it. And it's this whole emotional thing, and it's over really nothing, but it has a huge impact on life. So when you think about these crucial conversations, think of them in that vein. What is the outcome, and how major is that outcome? So how do you know you're in this crucial conversation? Um, well, there's several methods of having one, right? You can be on a phone call, you could leave a voicemail, you could send an email. But I think that's something that I've seen. I remember we had one person in our company that was very, very timid, I guess, timid when you talk to them in person. But then in an email, oh my goodness, blah, 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 they, all caps and this and that. And they were very, very bold in their email. And it was interesting how they were able to carry on these crucial conversations, or tried to, in through email, because that's where they felt the most comfortable. You can have them in person, right? So in person ones, I feel in person are the best, right? Because you can read emotion, you can talk to people, you can see how things are going. Nowadays, you can also text or through social media. I can't tell you the number of people you hear about. Well, so and so broke up with me through a text message. It's like, no, no, no. I'm trying to teach my kids that is not what you do, right? Be man enough to talk to them in person. But I understand it happens through text message. But really, what happens a lot with this is these conversations, because they're difficult to have, they're uncomfortable. People don't want to have them. Is a lot of times it's avoidance, right? They avoid having the conversation, and most people do that, and that's when it becomes very explosive. This is that person that you're like, hey, everything was fine, and then all of a sudden I walked into their office and asked them a question about something, and they blew up at me. And it's like, whoa, 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 wait a minute. What is going on here? I thought we were having a conversation about where we were going to lunch. And you tell me that I'm controlling and all I want to do is have it my way. And it's like, oh, what is going on here? This is a simple conversation about lunch. But this was something where they had been avoiding a conversation they needed to have with you about something else. And that discussion about where you want to go for lunch was the powder keg that kicked it off. And unfortunately, a lot of us are in that avoidant mindset that we have. So looking at it then, okay, so we know the methods, right? We know the different methods. We know that one of them is pretty volatile, or can be. Um, what does it look like? So most of them are spontaneous, and they talk about this in the book, the crucial conversations, where they talk about how sometimes they just come out of the blue, right? Asking about lunch, and then next thing you know, you're in a heated conversation with your spouse, or dinner or something like that. They catch us off guard. You don't realize that you're in one until all of a sudden it's too late and you're in one. The adrenaline kicks in, right? So that's how you know you're in one. You start to feel like, oh, wait a minute, wait a minute. This is getting kind of intense. I can feel it. And then that proverbial fight or flight. And really, in the office standpoint, or in the conversation standpoint, it's usually violence or silence, right? And violence being, I raised my voice, I shouted at him, I waved my fist, or silence. Yep, okay. You agree to Bishop because you can, and just say yep, and then you walk away, or you just don't say anything and you sit there and take it. And a lot of that's when we feel that we're getting into this adrenaline kick, and that's when we know that this is something that it becomes that crucial conversation. And unfortunately, a lot of people fall into what the book calls a sucker's choice. And I love the description of the sucker's choice. And when they talk about that, because this is something that's a real thing that a lot of us feel is like, well, I had no choice. Somebody had to tell them that they were being a jerk, or somebody had to tell them that they weren't doing. And it kind of back to that explosion, right? I haven't told them when they make small little things that add to this. I just waited for one small thing, the straw that broke the camel's back. And then I had to tell them, and you justify it in your head that, yeah, it's okay that I did that, because somebody had to do it. When really there's a third choice, and it's that candid and respectful approach to them. And that's not something that we see all the time, right? Because there isn't a class at school about how to have a crucial conversation. That's kind of why we're talking about it now. Is a lot of people don't get that training, and when we look at our lives, we see that most people just follow examples, right? And our parents, teachers, colleagues, employers. If we think about our parents, parents are not perfect. I'm a parent of three, and I am definitely not perfect. Sometimes we play the parent. Well, just that's because I said, I said so. Where the fight or flight, we try to beat our kids into submission with telling them, hey, I'm right. I'm the parent. You don't understand. Just be quiet. We don't want a discussion. We're not going to discuss this anymore. And I'm not saying that's necessarily wrong in all cases, but we're not providing a really, really good example of how to have a conversation about a very, very sticky subject, or a very crucial conversation with our kids. And this happens all along. So now all of a sudden, we don't have a really good baseline of how we should perform. Um, but if you think about it, and the book talks about this, is think about the person who's a really good leader in your company. How do they approach things? How do they convince people what the ideas are, or how do they change the direction of different discussions? And they do it so seamlessly that a lot of people don't pick up on it until you start to think about it. And you're like, wow, they just totally diffused that whole situation. That's amazing. How did they do that? And what they've got is they've got some practices and some skills and techniques that they can do to do that. And those skills, they're practice. They aren't skills you're born with. Obviously, we know that we're following examples of people that maybe or maybe not are following the best, or providing the best examples for us. Um, so when we have that, we have to practice it. It's a learned skill that we have to do, and you need to ask better questions. You need to see if you can make the experience positive and productive for both participants. And this is something that's really important. Is what do you want for the outcome? What do you want to be able to achieve? And nobody is going to be perfect at this right away. You have to be willing to try and make mistakes and get better. And this next slide is kind of where I'm going to deviate a little bit, and I'm not deviating from the book. I don't want to downplay what they talk about. They have some really, really good things, and again, I would read the whole book. It's amazing, but I want to add a little bit more to their steps. Their steps are really, really good, and I guess I'm going to go back more to the fact that you can only change yourself. We can't change someone else. And when you can't change anyone else, then your perspective changes on how you look at things and what you look at. And that's where we get back to this, built to lead, where we're working on our core and who we are as a person, then allows us to be better able to be in discussions and these crucial conversations, because you learn how to shift the conversation to not be about the person, and not generalize that you always do this. Just because your child lied about something doesn't mean that they're a liar. It means that they lied in that specific instance, and you learn how to be more confident in who you are, and you talk about your world beliefs and your principles, and what you believe, um, and you're not disputing what somebody else believes. You're just stating what you believe. So I think that's something that ties right into what the crucial conversations talks about, and their steps of going through. But this is something that we're doing as a company, that Built to Lead. Then you have to ask better questions, and this is something that the crucial conversations does talk about, right? What do I want for myself? What do I want the outcome to be? What would a sane, rational person be behaving in this way, right? A negative way or something. And this is a book I just recently read. I read it actually, finished it over the weekend, and it's Change Your Questions, Change Your Life. And I think it's just a really, really good book. It talked about being a judger, where you judge people and you jump to certain assumptions and conclusions, or a learner, and you kind of break it down to what am I assuming that could be wrong, right? So you assume somebody asking you a lot of questions in a meeting doesn't think you know what you're doing, when really they're just curious themselves, or they want to learn more. And you break it down to just being wanting to be curious. So I pulled up one of their choice map, and I think this is really really cool. And it kind of comes back to, like, when I say that leadership is a choice. Um, we have choices every day, all the time. And if you say, well, no, no, that person made me do it, I always tell my kids, well, was somebody holding a gun to your head to make you do that? And let me ask you this question: if you were in a bad part of town and somebody cut you off, are you going to roll down your window, yell out the window some cuss words, and flip them the bird? Probably not, right? You're in a bad part of town. You're just going to let them go through, and you're going to keep going and just be done with it. If someone cuts you off in a good part of town, what you might be inclined to say, well, he did it. He made me do it. He made me, swerve, and I yelled at him and everything like that. It's like, okay, so you did have a choice as to how you respond. And that's what the book is getting at is, well, they do it in questions. How do you ask better questions? But I kind of boil it down to that we're all responsible for ourselves and our interactions and how we choose to respond to what's out there. And I can't remember who said the quote, or I would have put it on here, is that, the person we are is found in the split second between when something happens to us and our response, right? Our response, that time between when something happens and our response to it, that's the person we are. And if we're under stress, we respond one way. If we're not under stress, what does that look like? And that's what the Change Your Questions book is basically talking about. That I think it's an easy read. It's a really really good read. It's a fable version, so it's got a story to it. Ben is the main character, and I know they talk about how a lot of people relate to Ben. So when you're having these crucial conversations, being able to ask questions, be curious, talk about what you want to get out of it, why you're doing the what you're doing, and what is it that we're trying to learn? What are my assumptions that could be wrong that will open up another path? How do I innovate from that? And I think that's a really good follow-on book. You read the Crucial Conversations, and then read the Change Your Questions. Really, really works well. Um, and the reason we kind of do this, and this is, how does this affect Wisper or your company, is you want to foster an increased idea pool. And this is something that Crucial Conversation talks about, is this increased idea pool. And I think looking back over the time, there are no bad ideas. There may be ideas that don't work, right? But they're not necessarily bad ideas. And usually it takes two or three bad ideas before you come up with your best idea. And the way you can foster this as a manager is, and I've heard some of my managers do this, and then we have a discussion about it, is we do EOS and we have an L10. So that's a level 10, which we can talk about someday. But an L10 is just a format of how we run our meetings. And the idea is you identify, you discuss, and solve problems, right? You want to solve recurring problems. So what you're looking for is, when you're in the discussion mode, what are ways we could solve this? How do we solve a problem? And I've heard many of our managers, someone will say, hey, well, what if we did this? And they're like, oh, nope, I already thought about that and that won't work. Or we tried that 3 years ago and that won't work. And what you're doing effectively is telling that person, I don't care about your ideas. And you're like, no, 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 I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that we tried it a couple of years ago and it didn't work. So a way to foster this idea pool would be like, well, that's kind of interesting. So, well, how would this work? And how would that work? And the way I would put this down is like, if my daughter, who's 12, asked for a pony, and we lived in a apartment complex, instead of just telling her, no, we can't have a pony, I ask her, okay, so where are you going to store the pony? And she's, oh, well, in the courtyard. You say, okay, well, do you think everyone else in the complex would like to have the pony? Oh, yes, Daddy. The ponies are so much fun. I would let little Susie ride it with me. It's like, okay, cool. And then what are you going to feed the pony? Oh, well, I would bring it hay and I would feed it hay. And it's like, oh, okay. Well, are you going to come home from school and feed the pony? Well, I mean, Daddy, could you do it? No, I have to be at work. Well, okay, I guess little Susie's mommy could do it. It's like, okay. And then you're like, okay, so, but where are you going to ride the pony? There's not a lot of room in that courtyard. And what are we going to do with that? And how are we going to ride it around? Well, I don't. And then all of a sudden, my daughter would hopefully come to the conclusion that we don't have room for a pony. And what you're doing is you're walking them through by being curious and asking them questions. In this one, you knew the outcome, right? Was that we can't have a pony in the city. But what you're trying to do is ask the right questions, and you're trying just to understand better what they're thinking, and to draw it out, because now this idea pool is much larger, and maybe a bad idea and another bad idea leads to a good idea, and you come to that conclusion. We're also trying to build stronger teams. If you have trust and you have the ability to speak your mind and your ability to ask the right questions and talk about different things, you build a stronger team. And there's not a lot of politicking, and there's not a lot of well, I didn't want to say this because it might offend so and so, and then if I said it, then they're going to think I'm trying to take their job away from them. No, this is we're shooting for what makes Wisper better, regardless of anything. And one kind of example of being able to speak your mind that we've done is like we play the office shuffle a lot. As we're growing, different people move different cubicles, different people move different offices, and I tell our facilities people that my office is up for dibs too. I'm not any better or any worse than any one of our employees. Do I want you to take my office without telling me why you need to do it? No, but I want them to think that if it's what's better for Wisper is that I need to lose my office and give it to somebody else because it works better, or give it to 3 other people or 2 other people, whatever it is. I am totally open to that, because it's for the betterment of Wisper. And that's having a strong team and being able to talk about that is super, super important. And that's what we're trying to do. And then building a healthier company. This is something that Patrick Lencioni talks about a lot, is that what's a healthier company, right? It's not just a strong company. It's not just a strategic company. It's not just a smart company. Is that we need to be a healthy company, and we need to have healthy conflict. We need to have healthy ideas. We need to have healthy innovation. And it's more than being strong, strategic, better, whatever it is. It's really, really being healthy. And that healthy then allows you to take on all those things that happen in the rest of the world, that you have no control over, but internally you have to deal with them. And now you're the strongest, healthiest company you can be, and that allows you then to approach those. And I think that's something that sometimes you don't realize. It's kind of like with other ailments as you get older, right? That you don't realize how much something is affecting you until it's either fixed or until it gets really bad. And that healthy company, you always have to be focusing on tweaking that. You always have to be focusing on, okay, I'm going to push the boundaries a little bit more, and we're going to get better and better as a company, and healthier and healthier, because we never know. Like, no one could have predicted coronavirus, right? No one could have predicted that. Healthy companies have probably done fairly well and been able to address what's going on and do the best they can. A company that isn't healthy, that might have been the straw that broke the camel's back, and they weren't prepared for it. They couldn't deal with it, and they went out of business, or they had to be sold or something like that. So there's a lot of good reasons to try to be a healthy company. And I think being able to have those crucial conversations, ask really good questions, allows you to be the healthiest you can, or sets you on the right path. So these are a couple books for a couple different reasons. I put these on here, and I really, really love, the crucial conversations is kind of the catalyst for this talk today. But I really, really like it. But there's a couple other ones on here that I'd love to talk about. Is the Multipliers. I've read that book multiple times. Really, really good. Radical Candor. It helps you. Radical Candor helps you apply the crucial conversation skills that they talk about. Multipliers also helps you understand how to multiply people, and a lot of them have very similar things they talk about, so they might resonate with somebody more. Multipliers may resonate more with you than Radical Candor, but I think they're really, really good. Then the Never Split the Difference. That one's the best negotiating book I've ever heard of, and that's something, or ever read, and I've read several of them on it. he's amazing what he talks about and how to do it. And then the other one I put up here was more for the family, that You Can't Make Me. This is the the book for your stubborn child, right? You can't make me, but I can be persuaded. So I think that one's a really, really good one if you have a stubborn child. The other two I have up here are just great books: Lie Spotting, and then also What Shamu Taught Me About Life, Love, and Marriage. You think, wait a minute, that's kind of a weird title, but it's really about social and understanding and being able to read people and understand kind of what makes them tick and how they've seen that. So those are the books I would highly recommend. We've got a couple questions here already, but if you have any questions, put them in the chat or the comment section, and I'm happy to answer those. So what's the hardest crucial conversation I've ever had to have? Ooh, recently or not? I find it, for me personally, much harder to have the crucial conversations at home than I do at the office. For whatever reason, my wife and I have an amazing relationship. We can talk about anything. I just have a much harder time talking about it at home. Don't know why. Don't know why, but I do. But my hardest one at the office is whenever I have to either fire someone or remove them from the role that they're in for one reason or other. Maybe we're not firing them, but we're moving them to a better role for the company. Those are always so hard because they're super high stakes, right? Because it either has to do with their livelihood, their family's livelihood, and it's never fun. I know it's the right decision, and I know to be a good leader, I have to make those decisions, but I don't enjoy it. But I've gotten a lot better at having them because I know my core, because I know where I want to take Wisper, and sometimes you just have to do those. And I've learned I have to do them sooner than later, right? Normally I would put them off and put them off and put them off. And now I've seen the amazing lift after I do it. It's the right decision, and then we get so much more done. But I think that's the hardest one I've ever had to do. The other question we have here is, has COVID shifted any crucial conversations? Yes and no. I think for me, what COVID has done is sometimes it's the privacy and the HIPAA rules. So, you need to have a conversation with somebody, but you can't have it because you don't want to say, oh, well, this person over here is who I'm talking about who may have COVID. So you can't really talk about it, whereas I prefer to talk about anything. The other thing that has happened is with the meetings, right? It's kind of interesting when the CEO asks you to meet. You kind of get like, what is it about? Even if I say, no, it's all good stuff, there's still people they're concerned and they're fret about it. And what do I get to prepared? So in order during COVID, when everybody was working from home, the only way I could have a spontaneous meeting with somebody was to schedule a video call. Or I guess I could call them on the phone, but I always like video anyway. So it's like, okay, that if I scheduled it, it was more of a, ooh, what's happening? Whereas when everybody was in the office, I could just pop into your office, or when you were walking by, be like, oh, hey, really good job on this. And what about this? And I just have a couple questions here. So I think it's made me more intentional about the conversations that I've had. I know others have had to be more intentional too, because you don't have those precipitous meetings in the hallways. It's also made it a little bit more difficult, though, in some cases, because how well are you doing? Are you good at working from home? Are we having some problems? How do I have that conversation with you when I want to do it face to face, but a video conference is still not the same as being face to face? And it's mission critical that I have this conversation with you to solve a problem or to move forward. But you're working from home and I'm working from home, and we have to do it over video. Yes, video is the next best thing than face to face, and maybe not, the phone is probably next after that. And I would never, ever want to do it in text messages and everything. And I used to, in the early days, I used to go back and forth with people on pretty crucial conversations through email. And it's never a good idea. You can't read into anything, or people read into it the wrong way because you can't hear their tone of their voice. You can't understand what they're talking about. So it's definitely not a good medium to do that. Let's see. Can we ask questions on any topic right now? Sure. I guess if you want to talk about something else, I'm happy to do that. You can, if you were here, that's basically all I have on the crucial conversations. But if you have other questions, I'm happy to keep going. You can tune off if you want, if you've gotten what you need out of it, but I'm happy to answer any other questions about anything. So I think they're typing it in. While we're waiting for that, I'm going to plug our Built to Lead that we're doing. We are offering the free classes when we get them set up. We're probably about a month away from having them set up for our own internal. What we're going to do is a 90-day, it's every 2 weeks, but a 90-day class, and we're going to start them every quarter. A 90-day class on building your core. Who are you? What are your world beliefs? What are your identity? What's your principles? We're going to do that. And then you'll have about a 6-month time frame of just coming to our every 2-week practices where you'll be able to ask questions, you'll hear from others and everything. And then we'll have another 90-day course that'll be building your opus, your love of work, and what is your game plan. And this isn't about Wisper. This isn't about the strategic direction Wisper's going. This is all about who you are as a person and where you're going as a person and your core and everything. So I think, don't think of it as a Wisper thing that we're doing. It's more just, it's about you. And because we're doing this for everybody at Wisper, you can be included in that as well. No marketing, no gimmicks, no nothing. It's, if you want to be there, great. If you don't want to be there, you don't have to. But we're going to offer that since we're kind of used to all doing this virtual anyway. We figured we could offer that to anybody who wants to sign on to that. We've had actually quite a few people who want to do it, so it's kind of exciting to see where it goes. All right, so it looks like we got a wireless question. Let's see. How do you view 5G as a threat to fixed wireless? Oh, wow. I have a full hour-long presentation on 5G. And maybe that can be one of our topics that we can shift gears a little bit and do that one of these. But in a nutshell, think back to 4G and how amazing 4G was supposed to be, if you believe the hype. And it was. The first phones that got onto 4G were amazing. It was so much better than 3G, and it worked all that. It was just great. And then when everybody got on it, it didn't work as well because it was saturated. And yes, it worked well, but it didn't work nearly as well. So then the next thing is okay, 5G is a whole bunch of hype as well. And 5G is 20% better than 4G. Don't get me wrong, 5G will be better than 4G. The only thing that makes 5G 10 times better than 4G is when you include millimeter wave. And millimeter wave is great for stadiums. It's great for train stations. It's great for really, really busy cities where you need a lot of speed to a lot of customers. Millimeter wave is not good for rural markets. Millimeter wave is not even good for urban suburban markets. It's good for urban in some cases, but not where people live necessarily compared to what they need to get. And there's videos out there on the internet of somebody standing there with a 5G connection, and it's amazing. And then they close the glass door and it drops. And then they open the glass door and it works again. That's the nature of millimeter wave. So when people are saying how awesome 5G is going to be very careful if they're talking about millimeter wave or is it just the next version of 4G? The other thing is there's so many places in America and around the world that have no Gs. I don't think we have to worry about 5G coming into our rural markets anytime really, really soon. Definitely not the millimeter wave, because they're going to build out the bigger cities where the bigger people are. And I know there's some providers out there, I won't name any names, they happen to have a lot of pink, that's talking about their 5G and how awesome it is. Well, that's a lower spectrum, and it is going to help their coverage, and it's going to provide a lot better service, but it isn't going to provide nearly the speeds that everybody's marketing because it's not millimeter wave and there's just not enough spectrum. So that's my short answer to the 5G. Maybe we'll have a little bit of fun and do that up because there's a lot more to it for why a fixed wireless provider may or may not want to do 5G. All right, looks like we opened up a Pandora's box. So what are your thoughts on Elon Musk's Starlink system? Do you think it's something to worry about for Wisp? Will we need to adapt? Um, I I really, really admire Elon Musk. I've read his biography, autobiography. My wife is from South Africa, so I've always been kind of intrigued. If anybody can do something awesome, he's going to be able to get it done. Um, Starlink is pretty darn cool. Go out and YouTube it, and there's a lot of videos that explain why it's going to work the way it does, why it's got less latency than fiber in the these long distances, and more reliable and everything. I think it's going to be really, really cool to see how it all kind of works out. Um, I think it is a threat that we have. It's probably the only satellite provider I'm worried about. All the other satellite providers are the latency is too high. So even if you have like 100 meg, when you click on something, if it takes a round trip of a second to 2 seconds, that's going to be perceived as slow. So I'm not so worried about them. But the Starlink is going to have a lot of potential for low latency. I'm a little concerned about how they're going to do it though, because right now it's relatively hard to get a satellite signal into a lot of the houses, at least in our area. We have a lot of trees. We don't have a lot of open air. And so if I'm, a fixed satellite TV, I only have to point in one direction. I have a beam width I have to get within, and I'm able to provide that service. For moving satellites, I have to pick up the satellite somewhere, and then I have to switch to the next satellite. So I'm not sure how that's going to work with them. I know they're figuring it out. I know beam forming and doing different things they're going to be able to do, but I'm wondering how much of the visible sky you need in order to have a consistent, reliable connection. And I think for me, the only thing that I'm really makes me feel a little bit okay about the Starlink is the fact that I know Elon Musk's true intentions are to figure out how to get payload into space as cheap as he possibly can. He wants to get to Mars, which awesome. I'm so glad he wants to do that. And launching 10,000, 40,000, 70,000, how many ever ends up being satellites into space is a real good way to figure out how do you actually get payload into space as cheap as you can. So I'm not so sure that he's going to be a super problem for us here in the U.S. I think it's going to be amazing for cruise ships. If you think about it, out on the ocean, you're going to be able to see the entire from horizon to horizon. So our oceans, which is 70% of the world, are going to have amazing internet, whereas right now they have zero. So that's really cool. And then in other countries, Africa, where there's not a lot of options, that's going to be amazing. And once they build it to go over one area, it has to go around the world and everything. So I really think there's a bigger market outside the US. I'm not sure what speeds they're offering. Originally, they were talking about 50 meg. If they go up to 100, maybe by that time, our fixed wireless is doing 500 to a gig, right? I mean, we can do it today with that. So maybe that's how we adapt and stay ahead of it. But I think it's really cool to watch what he's doing. So let's see. Growing fast with pains. Yes, that always happens, but sometimes I'd much rather worry about the growing pains than the shrinking pains. We find some employees are rising to the top. Advice on how to move someone as a manager over someone that has been with the company longer. Ooh, that is a really, really good topic. I'll have to have mark that down in my notes that we should talk about that. That's really, really good. That's such a good one. I don't think I'm going to answer that one right now. Let's do a longer discussion on that, because that is that's something we've dealt with a lot. I have a lot of experience with doing that, good and bad, and it's something that we like to do at Wisper, is move people into their roles and what they're passionate about. And sometimes it comes with pain, and sometimes it comes with just absolute joy, because they're moving into some place they can be successful. So let's do that as one of our other topics here. And then let's see, this other one we have here. Non-line of sight is a challenge. Is Wisper pursuing CBRS as a solution? I'm not going to talk about that one because the auction is going on, so no comment there. but non-line of sight is a very big solution, or a very, very big challenge. So let's see what else we have. It looks like we're typing here. This is great. Maybe we can do one of the topics. I have to come up with all these presentations, which is something fun I like to do, but maybe we can just have a Q&A time where you guys can send in some of your questions ahead of time, and then people can ask questions. I'm happy to talk about it. I prefer the interactive anyway than me just regurgitating things. So let's see, we're waiting for another one to come in here. While we're waiting for that, I would say that the best solution for non-line of sight is line of sight, a chainsaw or lots of towers. That's definitely something that I believe firmly in, is how to get people line of sight whenever possible. We have so much more spectrum in line of sight than we do in non-line of sight capable, regardless of what frequency you're using. All right, so you can provide people with any speed. Yeah, so the statement is, as a WISP, we put in more towers and pops in as many areas as possible. If we can get towers closer to a sub, then technically we can provide people with any speed. Would I agree? Yes, 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 absolutely. I firmly believe that. Our network philosophy has always been, from the day one, 17 years ago, be as close as you can to the customer. I would rather have 5 smaller towers than 1 super tower. There's a couple reasons for that. One, my signal to noise ratio. Signal to noise is the most important thing for WISPs. It's how loud is the outside area versus how loud am I shouting. And if it gets too close, you can't get a good signal. So the closer you are, right, even in a vacuum or even with no noise around you, you still have what's called free space loss. So I'm still losing signal as I go further and further away. So if I can stay closer, that means I can have a better signal, which then means I can provide you better service. And is it any speed? Yeah, the closer you are, millimeter wave, right? I can go up to a gig. I can do a 10 gig link up to 2 miles. So yes, typically the shorter you are, the more speed you can offer, the more spectrum you have available to you. So we subscribe to this theory for sure. The other thing it does is it keeps your sub counts down per AP. I know a lot of people always like, well, I want 100 subs per AP. And business-wise, yes, I want 100 subs per AP. Reality, there's not enough spectrum. There's not to do that. Maybe there are now with some of our multi-user MIMO and everything. We're raising that bar, right? We're raising how many we can, but definitely not 200, 300, 400, 500 customers if you're selling them any type of real package. So we've looked at it and said, okay, no, this having more APs in the air allows us to shrink our cell sizes and put fewer customers per tower. One problem we run into, though, is then the backhaul. How do you manage the backhaul, and what do you do? And that's where having access to a lot of fiber or doing a lot of your backhauls with license band gives you that ability to roll that out. But I would firmly believe, I do firmly believe in having more access points, more pops versus less pops is a better thing. Another question we have is, are we pursuing any fiber to the home overbuilds in any size town in your area? Yes, and this is something that I always find is interesting, that I'll talk to a WISP and they'll be like, hey, I'm going to go build fiber in this town over here. And I'm like, oh, great. How many customers do you have in that town? Oh, I don't have any customers in that town, but I'm gonna go build fiber because it's a great town for me to move into. I'm sorry, as one of your first ones, it's going to be no. I want to build fiber in a town I have 70 to 80% market penetration already with wireless, because that's an area I own the market. I'm providing great service to the customer, but that's a really safe way for me to build out fiber. I'm going to have mistakes. I'm not going to know everything. I build it out there, and normally when you run fiber numbers, you're like, well, I need 20% market penetration, or I need 50, or I need 75, whatever your numbers show you. That having that base, I'm cannibalizing my own customers. And I think it's interesting. There's a lot of companies that have gone out of business. Biggest one I know of, Kodak, right? They invented the digital camera, but they made so much money off of the film and film processing that they didn't actually ever release a digital camera. They sold the rights to it and had royalties off of it, but when those royalties went away, boom, company went under. Whereas if you'd really looked at what the core thing of a Kodak was to allow people to take pictures. And if they had remembered that that was their core focus, then they wouldn't have gone out of business because they would have been the leader in digital, and we would have, you know, a Kodak everywhere, and you wouldn't talk about selfies, you'd be talking about Kodaks or something like that. So there's been a lot of companies, and what I really liked about HP is they had their laser printer division, but then they also came out with their dot matrix, not dot matrix, sorry, they came out with their bubble jet technology, and they totally changed the industry and the printer industry and everything going on with that. But they cannibalized their own, right? It was cheaper to have a bubble jet printer than it was a laser printer. And you might say, oh, well, they're cannibalizing. What are they doing? It's like, but that's okay. They're still in business, and they created a big, even bigger market than what they had before. So it's interesting. I as a service provider, I view it that you don't get to choose how I provide you service. I get to choose how I provide you service. You shouldn't care as a customer. Right now, the marketing says fiber to the home is better and everything, but I sleep really well at night knowing our wireless works really well. But in an area where it makes sense for us to run fiber, I'm going to go to every one of our wireless customers and be like, all right, we're upgrading your service. Here's your fiber service. Well, I didn't want that. Don't need that. Does it going to cost me anymore? In some areas, we may charge them a larger setup fee, but in most areas, we're looking at no, we're providing you with service, and we're changing that. So no, we're definitely looking at that. What I'm looking for, kind of the question was, in any size town in our area, I'm kind of looking for the non-tier cities. So a tier one city, a tier two, tier three, those are big cities. And while they may be enticing to run fiber in those are kind of an expensive play. There's a lot of zeros that go behind fiber, and we're having a hard enough time keeping up with our wireless demand. So when we go to a small 500 residents, 500 homes in the area, that's a really good size for us. Maybe it's a subdivision that has 150 homes. Maybe it's a subdivision only has 10. But if it's the right tool for the right job, if that's an area that I cannot get wireless into for one reason or another, and fiber's available right there, then that works out really well. All right. Well, you guys are full of questions. This is awesome. I think this is going to be the last one because we're getting almost to an hour, but this is great. Let's see. Do you find as you get larger, your upstream provider becomes more apprehensive because they are afraid that you'll take their business? I haven't seen that. We buy from some of the largest ISPs. I think they're fourth in the world as far as size. So I have a long way to go before I get to be their size. I would say if we were buying from a small local regional provider, I could see where they might get a little apprehensive. I do know on the transport side, though, we've run into that issue where we'll buy transport from a fiber provider, and then all of a sudden we're competing against each other because they've moved into our area, we've moved into their area, and that becomes a little more contentious and time for a crucial conversation, right? You got to talk to them about it, and you got to be able to figure out, what are their goals. For the most part, we're not focused on business. We're not focused on providing fiber to a cell tower or services to a cell tower to a carrier. Yes, we'll go after bigger customers like anchor institutions like hospitals and schools, but for the most part, we're a retail or residential play. So that's worked out fairly well. That I don't have any agreements with any of my fiber providers that I will not go after those customers, but I tell them that's not what we do. And we're focused on the residential. Please send us all the residential they possibly can, and we'll let them, focus on the business. And sometimes we win a business, sometimes we don't. And so far, that's worked out very well for having a good relationship with people. So, all right, well, cool. That was really good. I'm so glad you guys had so many questions. It was really good to talk about those. And please bring your questions, and maybe we'll set up a time to be able to do that, where we'll reach out and get some pre-done questions, and we'll have some good Q&A time. So with that, thank you so much for joining us today and talking about crucial conversations, plus everything else we talked about, from 5G to fiber to the home to satellite internet. It was really good stuff. Thanks a lot, and have a great rest of your week.